Thank you very much for the invitation and for speaking in your conference. I would like to introduce very quickly my colleagues. Waleed Abourya is the president and CEO of Middle East Business Promotion Center. He played so many functions in the Egyptian market, and not only the Egyptian market, but also the area in the steam coal area, green pit coke, met coal, met coke, several areas in the carbon area and in the carbon industry. He also was involved in the export of the first pit coke production in the Egyptian market for more than 10 years with several international companies. And he's one of the main suppliers of steam coal or solid fuel into the Egyptian market. Mr. Mehmet Topeli is the Energy Planning and Reporting Manager of Iskenderun, Enerji, Uretim, Ticaret AS, and we've been meeting a lot during the last years. He's my expert in the coal-fired power plants and in the planning and reporting technology and strategy, especially strategy and how to run such plants. Bahadir, Kepenek, Procurement Manager of CIMSA, Cimento, Sanayi, Ticaret in Turkey. And you know all about procurement people. Huh? So he's one of the known people in the area of procurement in the CIMSA. I would like to start with Waleed, being Egyptian, so I will start by him, and I would like him to give us an overview of what's happening in the Egyptian market in the solid fuel area and the met coal area.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here, and thanks to Coaltrans for inviting us to attend this important panel. As Afifi introduced me, we are both from Egypt, which is supposed to be the fastest growing market in terms of using solid fuels. And actually, that's a good fit for the topic of this panel discussion. While we're talking about the shrinking European market, in Egypt, it's a booming market, talking about solid fuels. I've talked before and explained about how Egypt decided to convert from using natural gas as the source of fuel for cement production to solid fuels, which happened in 2014. The first coal shipment or solid fuel shipment came to Egypt was around May 2014. And there was a big rejection, let's say, from the authorities in Egypt to allow people to start using solid fuels due to environmental reasons. But there was no other way except to give the green light for cement production to convert their fuel because of the massive shortage of natural gas that we had. Although Egypt at one point of time was an exporter of natural gas, but as everyone knows, in 2011 we had this political turmoil and the uprising that created a big hole actually in the whole political system, and that created a big delay in exploration of new gas fields and the plans, even the old plans for gas fields. So at a certain point of time between 2011 and 2014, we started to have actually a power crisis because of the lack of natural gas, the increase of demand on natural gas. So the government decided eventually to give in and allow cement producers to convert to using solid fuels. Egypt is still one of the fast growing countries in terms of construction and developments. The recent count of population showed that now we have a population of 104 million people. And according to the official numbers, Egypt needs 500,000 new housing units every year. And that requires a lot of cement as well as a lot of steel and aluminium. So maybe Egypt is still one of very few countries that you can still find new cement plants coming into production as well as new steel plants coming into production. However, due to this increase in production, till last year, Egypt produced about 60 million tons of cement. This year, maybe we're going to see it coming up to 70 million. and maybe within, by year 2020, we're going to reach to 90 million. At this number, this is putting a bit of pressure on cement producers when it comes to pricing, because that will create a surplus in demand, and we might find Egypt becoming an exporter of cement if the economics are working well. But at this point of time, most of the producers, let's say, have already converted their system to using solid fuels, which is mainly steam coal, but some others are also using petroleum coke, but that would be mainly a company like Lafarge, for instance, that has a big plant in Egypt, big production, as well as Cemex. These maybe are the only two cement producers in Egypt that use 100% pit coke, and no steam coal is used. But we have also Titan, they are using pit coke and steam coal, Simpor using a combination of pit coke and steam coal, but all the rest are mainly using steam coal. We're talking about 28, 29 producers in Egypt of cement, and although we started only in 2014 receiving solid fuel shipment, as of this year, I think we reached up to maybe 4.5 million tons. Next year, we're going to see another maybe million tons added, because one of the new plants that belongs actually to the army is starting up, which has 6 lines of production of more than 10 million tons of cement production, and that would require another substantial tonnage as well. So I believe by year 2020, we will see demand is going to increase to at least 10 million tons. That's only for cement. When it comes to power generation, Egypt currently produces about 32,000 megawatts of power, and that has been mostly produced by natural gas as well as fuel oil, and a small production of about 2,000 megawatts of hydropower. Having said that, and in order to diversify the fuel basket, as they call it, so the government decided to expand the power generation portfolio into coal-fired power plants as well as a nuclear power plant. So the plan is within the coming maybe 10 years, we need to double our output of power. And there are maybe now 3 power plants in the pipeline to have coal-fired power generation. There have been talks about maybe adding another 15 to 18,000 megawatts of coal-fired. As you may know, to produce 1,000 megawatts of coal-fired power plants, you need about 2.5 million tons of solid fuel or coal. So we might be seeing an additional requirement of 40, 50 million tons only for power generation. Of course, that created a lot of problems in logistics and in facilitating receiving those additional tonnage. And one of the big challenges that we have is ports and congestion in ports, which is still a long way to solve. We have a big waiting time. There are only 3 ports that are allowed to receive dirty cargoes, as they call it. And these are 2 ports on the north, or 1 port on the Mediterranean and 2 ports on the Red Sea. But that's still not enough for the volume that's coming. There are plans to build a new terminal on the Mediterranean to accommodate up to Cape-sized vessels, but that's going to take maybe 3-4 years to complete. And there's also a new terminal being built on the Red Sea that's going to accommodate a Panamax. However, there's still a lot more that needs to be done, and the government is trying really to push forward to solve those problems, but it's one of the biggest challenges that we're having now. Egypt is not really a producer of solid fuels except in pit coke right now. We have a production of about 500,000 tons of pit coke from 2 refineries. That number might come to 1 million tons soon. There's another refinery that is going downstream, an existing one, adding a hydrocracker and delayed coking unit, and they will be producing another maybe 500,000 tons. Another refinery called the Asyut refinery, which is actually sharing the same fence with Cemex cement plant. They have already signed a contract as well to go downstream, and they will be producing pit coke. So CIMEX actually has been buying their fuel from that specific refinery when they used to consume fuel oil before they convert using pet coke. So they would be really the lucky one when that refinery starts producing pet coke. So Egypt, within the coming, let's say, 3-4 years, would have a production of maybe 1.5 million tons of pet coke. It's still, some of that is high sulfur. That's why the environmental regulations actually allow up to 8% sulfur in pet coke, which is a high sulfur content. But one of the biggest refiners producing pet coke sometimes have this kind of sulfur content. That's why the government allowed up to that level. But although this is the limit, we didn't see yet Saudi coke coming into Egypt. As you may know, that Saudi Arabia has already started a production of about 2 million tons of pet coke that would go up maybe to 4, which is a very good geographical fit to come into Egypt. But still the sulfur is quite high, maybe above 8, but we still did not see any of that sulfur coming to Egypt because most of the users, even using pet coke, they prefer to have a level between 4 to 5% sulfur. For steam coal, it has been like a geographical fit as well for South African coal to come into Egypt, as well as few shipments of Mozambique coal, and that's mainly for cement plants that would be located on the east part of Egypt. And also the Mediterranean allows, let's say, Russian coal to come into Egypt as well as Colombian. Recently, we started to see also US coal shipments coming to Egypt because of the very high numbers that we've been seeing for the API 4 and the API 2. So people in Egypt started to be more creative, and before they did not like to use US coal with higher sulfur, higher volatiles, but when the level reached to above $100 for delivered coal to Egypt, they started to look into a discounted quality from the US. So we have seen maybe this year about 300,000-400,000 tons of US coal coming into Egypt with higher sulfur. We're not sure whether this is going to continue because if you go to this kind of sulfur, if you push it a bit higher to 4.5, you can use pet coke, which has a 25% higher in net calorific value. But still, a lot of people, when they start the conversion from using natural gas to solid fuels, they would prefer to start by steam coal having sulfur of no more than 1%, a bit low volatile matters of 25 to 28%. And then after production is stabilized, they can think about increasing volatiles to above 30, maybe increasing sulfur a bit, but it takes some time. In any case, at the time that we are seeing, as per the topic title, that Europeans are shrinking, Egypt is expanding, and it's going to continue to expand, and it's going to continue to be one of the biggest players in the solid fuel markets in the MENA region. Hope that we be able to solve those challenges, mainly in logistics and other issues of environment, which is dealing with coal as if this is really a bad thing to use. I've said it before, but one of the interesting things, after the government allowed the use of coal, we found a page on the Facebook called Egyptians Against Coal. And people were thinking that the minute Egypt will start using coal, everyone's going to die. But thankfully, we've been using coal now for the last 3 years intensively, and no one died so far. So things are getting a bit easier and a bit simpler. So hopefully that will continue and will continue to expand, and hopefully we'll be able to solve our problems and become the leaders in the region, inshallah. Thank you,
Waleed, for the overview. At the time, European and other markets are trying to shrink using the coal. We are expanding in the solid fuel. So the question is going always to be the right solid mix and the environmental impact, which is a big question that I will come back to Waleed again. But for Mr. Mehmet Topeli, up till now, we don't have any solid thermal coal power plants in the Egyptian market. And I know that the Turkish market have already started long time ago. Would like to know from you a little bit about the economics of generating electricity by using solid fuel and the impact of environment based on the new regulations of the European Union, and how do you see this affecting energy generation by solid fuel in Turkey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Afifi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank Coaltrans organizers for giving us opportunity to talk about Mediterranean region, because up to now we all hear about pessimistic scenarios for the coming years. When you look at from the perspective of Europe and Western countries, Western Europe, including US and Canada. However, the most promising market will seemingly the Mediterranean region in the short mid-term, in parallel to some developments in the Far East Asia. As Afifi already mentioned, we have already started consuming imported coal. We have a long coal history in Turkey, but the first imported coal-fired power plant was Iskenderun coal-fired power plant. It was built in 2001 and in operation since then. And due to the successful operation of the power plant and the increase of the Turkish electricity demand, Isken was taken as a model, and a couple of more power plants had been built afterwards. Fortunately, all of them were running quite successfully, and they have no harm to the environment. They are all equipped with state-of-art technologies. They are all equipped with DENOX systems, and dust issues are already solved. So we are already operating our coal power plant fleet in Turkey with respect to the European Union regulations. And with that respect, Turkey is still need energy, and in this case, a lot of feed-in tariffs have already been given for the renewable energy, and renewable energy is more or less like the star in Turkey. However, coal still keeps its importance and will continue its importance in the coming years. When I say coal, I talk about both lignite, which is local coal, and imported coal. In the last year, there was an additional tax is brought for the imported coal, because our government is mainly looking after utilizing our all local resources. And at the target of 2023 for the Turkish market, all local resources has to be utilized, which means they are giving real importance for the local lignites. Due to the fact there are not so many new projects at the imported coal fired power plants. The latest one will be the Canal power plant in Karabiga, which will be in Greece next year, early next year. But afterwards, I personally don't think that there will be some new projects coming in the short term, unless the government change their philosophy and idea. However, Turkey and Mediterranean region is still a big market for the coal-fired power, coal market, import coal market. Last year in 2015, Turkey, I think, imported around, or 2016, around 30 million tons of imported coal. 30 million tons. And when you think that Europe is decreased to 150 million tons or 160 million tons in 2016, so Turkey is the major coal market, and will keep its importance in the coal area in the following years because all the power plants will continue running as well. In Turkey, imported coal-fired power plants are still base-load power plants, which means they are operating mostly and their operation. There might be some seasonal effects, for example, in spring, and so maybe there will be less demand of coal in Turkey at all. But the imported coal-fired power plants are the base load power plants and the backbone of the grid system, so will continue consuming coal in the short mid-term.
So you think there will be always an expansion in the coal-fired power plant in the future in the Mediterranean and Turkey?
There will be expansion in Turkey in the local lignite power plants, but the already installed coal-fired power plants will continue production for long years because Turkey needs energy. Although some feed-in tariffs have been given for renewable energy and for local resources, the demand is increasing. In the last year, again, 5-6% power demand increased in Turkey. Therefore, in order to catch up the demand, supply has to increase. But for new imported projects, maybe you hear a lot about projects in Turkey which may be realized, but I think they will wait until there will be a real change in the philosophy of the government, because these feed-in tariffs are changing the market conditions in unfavor of imported coal. Therefore, they are all in waiting stage. But as I told you, the ones who have already been installed will continue to run, hopefully for long years, and continue consumption.
Thank you very much, Mr. Topeli. I will move to Mr. Kepenek, who is the procurement manager of CIMSA. And looking into the cement industry, there is an oversupply everywhere. Competition is becoming very tough. So procurement is one of the main areas that would really help reducing the cost per ton of cement.
Yeah.
The way we have oversupply in the Egyptian market, we see also that there is an oversupply in Iran, oversupply in Turkey, as far as I know. Where are the areas that you really focus in the future when it comes to solid fuel to reduce your cost? And what about your energy mix and energy efficiency in your plant and in the Turkish market?
Yeah, thank you again. I'm the procurement of the CIMSA, cement factories, and we have 6 plants, in fact. And first, as a producer, we mainly focus on the petcoke. We import the material mainly from the America states. And for actively, we've been getting the material also from domestic source. One, we have Tüpraş now. And next year, hopefully, we'll have the SOCAR and the Star Refinery.
You're using mainly petcoke?
Yes, okay. Mainly petcoke. And, but in first sight, in some cases, in some areas, the Tüpraş is one of the drivers to reduce the cost, and we get material. But in order to balance the high sulfur content, we also need either low sulfur, the petcoke, or the coal. So we have different plants, and in some we can benefit from the local sources, Turkish lignites, from the Turkish coal enterprise. And for some places, it's distant from the sources, and we need to get steam coal. So most probably, I think there can be a shift to petcoke, in my opinion. Now there are some factories they use mainly the coal Some of them because of the technology maybe. And
But what I understand from you is that you're mainly using pit coke, but you're also blending it with steam coal.
yes.
What's the percentage?
If we get a high sulfur pet coke, it's around, let's say 65, 70%.
The
rest-
major part is pit coke.
Yes,
And the
major
rest
part
is,
is pet coke, yes.
And the rest is lignite or imported steam coal.
Yes, you're right. And so, in my opinion, with the new local refineries, I mean, will increase the tonnage from the pet coke from local sources. Again, as a calorific value, you know, pet coke is more advantageous at the moment if your technologies, you know, comply with it. Another side, so we will try to increase the local the lignites.
Okay.
This is the key drivers, in my opinion.
When it comes to cement competitiveness, do you export cement from Turkey? And what are you competitive? And how do you see the future of this compared to Iran?
Yeah, this is kind of hard questions to answer because as the company, I mean, we have gray cement production and also white cement production. We have terminals outside Turkey, I mean, in Europe and other places, just in Stais, for example. And we can easily, you know, export the white cement. But in the gray side, I mean, it's oversupplied and competition takes place. In comparison to Iran, I don't have a clear overview for the future. But most probably from all the factors will force the export.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll go back to Waleed. You've mentioned about the use of solid fuel and the expansion of using of solid fuel in the Egyptian market, and you've focused on the running situation, present situation, and I think we did not consider the new industrial areas that will come in production during the coming years. My question is, what are the challenges you foresee using the solid fuel, and whether the new renewable energy will also deduct a little bit of usage of steam coal in the Egyptian market?
Well, for the renewable energy, and let me start by that. Yes, renewable energy is, of course, great. However, renewable energy somehow can, let's say, replace maybe electricity generation. But when it comes to industrial projects, you need heat. You don't need hydropower. You don't need electricity. You need heat. And for cement production as well as bricks production, let's say, and even lime, calcining lime, you just need heat. In order to achieve this kind of heat needed, you need either to use natural gas or fuel oil, or even in Saudi Arabia, they use crude oil. They burn crude oil to produce cement. And you need a temperature of maybe 1600 to 1800 degrees Celsius inside a cement kiln. So you cannot really use renewable energy for that. So you need something that really gives you the required heat. Egypt now is trying to take a very long and big jump into industrialization, and they are really encouraging foreign investors to come and put investments in production facilities and in increasing industries, let's say. Having said that, and I see that one of the questions also being asked about the gas field that has been recently discovered in the Mediterranean called Zohr. This gas field is one of the biggest in the world. And it has confirmed reserves of, I think, 30 trillion cubic feet of gas. Egypt demand is about 2 trillion cubic feet of gas every year. And in the past, we used to really fully rely on gas in power generation, in cement production. And well, thank God that we ran into this kind of shortage, because that forced the government to allow people to convert it using solid fuel and freeing capacity of natural gas, which is a very important or the main feedstock for other very important industries like fertilizers or petrochemicals. And Egypt is really in need and in big deficit of fertilizers as well as petrochemicals. We still have big industry for that in Egypt, but you still need much more gas to be directed as the feedstock instead of just burning it. So I believe the challenge will continue to be how to expand using solid fuels. It's going to continue to grow. The first ones that they allow it to use is cement, and then power is coming. And after that, I'm sure bricks production or bricks producers will also be allowed. Right now, some of them are using locally produced pet coke illegally, and they are not licensed to use it, but I'm sure at a certain point of time, they will allow them to use it. So I expect to see bigger logistics challenge, and that will maintain to be our biggest problem so far. And we need to also have some sort of educative knowledge given to the people in Egypt and try to change their minds about the solid fuel being a disaster, because a lot of people in Egypt, they think that solid fuel is a disaster, which I'm not. I've been in this field for like 30 years, and I didn't see really big disasters. You can find disasters from a lot of other things. The only bad thing about solid fuels that it's black, but it's the same thing like any other dry bulk material. You have the same pollution if you don't take your precaution. And as I always said, there is no clean industry and dirty industry. Actually, the biggest polluting element on the planet is the human being. And if we don't take our measures as human beings to protect the environment, the whole world will be a mess. So it's a matter of what kind of precautions you need to take and measures to prevent pollution.
There is a question here that is saying, what are the implications of Zohr gas field on Egyptian thermal coal demand? And this is a decision that has been taken by the government that the natural gas coming from Zohr is not going to be used for the cement industry and is not going to be used as a fuel unless it's needed for electricity generation. So at the end of the day, we have no other way but to use thermal coal or solid fuel and maybe other new sources for the cement industry. When it comes to, thermal coal or green pet coke. When it comes to Zohr, I think there will be a lot of other industries that will come into production and into investment, especially as Waleed said, fertilizers, melamine, and all this, because the value added to the gas will be much more, and also we will start exporting again natural gas from Egypt. While the strategy of natural gas or Zohr gas especially is not yet announced, but the only part that has been announced is that it's not going to be used in cement. I'll go to Mohammed again. How do you see the economics of coal-fired power plant compared to gas and to compare to other power plant generators? We have built already two huge natural gas-based plants in Egypt by Siemens, and now there is a tender going on for 3 or 4 coal-fired power plants. Do you think it's much more competitive to use solid fuel and coal-fired power plant more than natural gas, and how do you see the future of this?
Thank you, Afifi. I also see the question here. Maybe I can combine both of them so we can also save the time. Let me start with the question. Turkish authorities claiming that they will turn their face to domestic source instead of importing them. Do you see it's realistic? Yes, there is an ambitious target of using local resources in the energy production. That's mainly why, in order to decrease the natural gas, we are heavily relying on natural gas in energy production, especially in 2014. Approximately 50% of our energy production was from natural gas. And as a result of it, Turkey gives a huge foreign trade deficit. And only 60% of the foreign trade deficit is coming from natural gas. So the main issue is, in order to decrease the foreign trade deficit, government giving feed-in tariff for local resources, and they try to decrease the amount of natural gas. So we can't rely on all local resources, because although such strategies are applied already in Turkey, now natural gas has been decreased steadily to 37%, 33%, but this year, up to October this year, again, we have to produce power from natural gas because of the dry season and less hydro production. Consequently, we have to rely on imported resources in our energy production portfolio. When I come to your question, Afifi, it depends on, of course, it depends on the prices of the solid fuel and natural gas. Time by time, we are also analyzing the price, especially this dark spread and spark spread. Nowadays, because of very high prices of the coal, spark spread is more or less equal or a little bit better than dark spread. So you can't say one of them is relatively much economic than other. It depends on the market conditions and price of the resources. And this also motivates the power producers in Turkey to switch from natural gas to coal-fired production. But this high level of imported coal prices are hindering the development of the coal market in Turkey as well.
Do you think that you said that it's 50% natural gas, based on natural gas, and 50% based on solid fuel?
No, in the total portfolio, in the past, in 2014, 50% was from natural gas, let's say 25% from coal and 25% from hydro and renewables.
Which is the most cheap
Yes.
kilowatt hour? Which one is the most cheapest?
Of course, hydro is the most cheap.
And then number two?
Number two, coal. But as I said, the prices now increase so high that now the fuel prices of natural gas and coal is competing with each other. And it depends on the efficiency of the power plant. And you can't say now coal is much better than or natural gas also, only because of this very high price of the coal for the time being. But in the past, of course, when the coal prices are much affordable, coal is quite cheaper than natural gas.
Very good. Using a lot of green pit coke, I'm sure you analyze the future of the green pit coke supply into the Turkish market. How do you see the supply of green pit coke in the future, knowing that not much low sulfur coke in the market, available in the market like before, and the more high sulfur coke is being produced? What is your strategy of green pit coke procurement, and how do you see the future of this?
Are we talking about the import or the local one?
Import. Import.
Yes, and many of the refineries in America change the crude, and we see year by year and the more high sulfur content. And in white cement production in our factories, I mean, we are dependent on the mid sulfur. That's why, I mean, we'll try to get it with some kind of a contract base. And for the high sulfur side, I mean, if the spread is high enough, I mean, we can use it, and then we can balance the sulfur content with the steam coal. But nowadays, because steam coal prices are higher than the petcoke prices, that's why we rely on the local coal sources. But this is also limited. I mean, in two of the mines, I mean, the production in Turkey are about 2.5 million tons, but the demand is about 7 million tons. So it's getting more and more scarce, and that's why we try to find other alternatives. We try to use the alternative fuels, and we try to increase the efficiency.
This was going to be my next question, whether you're using any of the alternative fuels, RDF, biomass, other sources to reduce the cost of per ton of cement.
In one of our plants, we had the hot disk, and we used the waste in some percentage. And
municipal waste. Municipal waste. Municipal waste or
in fact,
RDF.
there are some special companies. I mean, they collect from different sources. They have everything, textiles and other sources, and we use it in some percentage.
Okay, thank you very much. The last question is going to be to Waleed, and it's a question here coming whether the investors will come and invest in the new solid port terminals needed in the Egyptian market.
I can see there are two questions. One, like Afifi said, about the foreign investors. Well, foreign investors in Egypt are always welcome to invest in anything. In other words, there are no restrictions whatsoever on any kind of foreign investors or foreign investments. So if there's any company that's interested to come and put an investment in that, they are welcome, and they will open all the doors for them. So, I mean, it's not going to be like limited on locals or limited on foreign. Whatever the investment is, as far as it's going to be useful for the country and for the system, it's always welcome. I see another question referred to desulfurization in power plants. I believe there might be someone who's dealing in scrubbers that is asking this question. For sure, there will be emissions limits that every power plant, like every industry, will have to meet and comply with. Whatever required to meet those kind of emission limits, they will do whatever it takes to reach and comply with those environmental regulations. But that's still not yet finalized for power plants. It is finalized for cement plants. And even now, cement plants are required to put a monitor for their emissions that's linked around the clock to the environmental authorities, so they can monitor the emissions all the time. Thank you.
For the power plants, as I mentioned, there is a tender in 3 positions, three destinations in the Egyptian market, and the specification is put by a Japanese consulting company, and it's the newest technologies coming from Alstom, from GE, from all the very well-known companies, and there are and it's based on EPC plus F. So the government is the one who's going to buy this at the finance from the EPC companies, and 3 or 4 group of companies have offered, and I think it will be decided before the end of the year, or it will maximum during the first quarter of 2018. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your valuable information, and thank you all for your good listening. Thank you.